right, well, welcome everyone. Hopefully everyone had a good lunch, or if you just rushed in, came on a tram or got a cab from the airport, you're not too frantic. This is a really exciting panel. If you've had any chance to walk the show floor, AI is everywhere. It feels like cloud computing was like 10 years ago. Everything was cloud. But I think this is an area in which I think I'm seeing some really interesting and exciting applications. And as you'll find out today, hearing from our panelists, which are great panelists, there are some really interesting use cases, and farmers and ag really needs this technology. So we're going to talk all about that. But I want to welcome people just generally to the AgTech session and AgTech Summit at CES. This is put on by The Spoon. My name is Michael Wolf. I'm the founder and CEO of The Spoon, which is a food tech media and ag tech media company. We put on events. We write about interesting startups and all sorts of interesting technology developments. And so I'm really excited to be here at CES. This is the second time we've had a dedicated AgTech Summit at CES. So we're really excited for that. And I encourage you guys to kind of really cheer on the panelists as I bring them up on stage right now. Come on up, guys. Welcome, have a seat. Hopefully your mic works. You might have to turn it on. All right, well, I'm gonna just go from the closest to farthest and have you guys introduce yourself. Jacqueline Hurd, you're the CEO and founder of Enko. And tell us a little bit about you and what you do for Enko and what Enko does.
So I have been in agriculture my entire career. I've led R&D portions of companies. I was at Monsanto for 13 years, so big multinationals. And then I got this bug for being an entrepreneur and starting little companies. So I've done a lot of that company creation. So I went into venture capital, and that's where I co-founded Enko. And Enko is a inputs company. We develop safe and sustainable chemistry to control pest and disease for farmers globally. We have an AI-driven discovery engine that really does a lot to reduce the cost, improve the outcomes of the discovery process so that you can be very selective. We took our inspiration early on from the pharmaceutical industry, who, if you take a targeted approach for things like cancer, you can have much better patient outcomes. Well, the same is true for agriculture. If you're targeting a pest, you want it to be specific for the pest and not do anything to the environment or other people that are working with the chemistry. So that is our approach, and we're 8 years old and have raised about 150 million. So we're on our way to developing products.
Great. And next up we have Sarah Schinckel. You work for a little startup I think many people may have heard of in farming called John Deere. And you're the Director of Emerging Technologies and Architecture. What do you do all day?
Yeah, thanks. So I love it. I was listening to your introduction, and I was like, oh, this will be a good segment. So John Deere, if you're not familiar, we're a 185-year-old company, so a little bit different. And I've spent 20 years at John Deere. My background is software. I was started as a software engineer, and over the years have been working on precision agriculture technology. So super excited to be here today and talk about how technology is helping farmers do their jobs more precisely, more productively. That's something we're really focused on at John Deere. And so if you haven't had a chance to be at our booth today, or sometime during the conference, we're here showing off autonomous machines. And so we have tractors, we have orchard tractors, we have construction equipment, commercial lawn mowing equipment. And so we're really focused on how do we help all of our customers use technology to do their businesses better. And so that's where we focus. My team is really looking at emerging technologies and where do we need to go? How do we adopt emerging technologies? How do we bring those to our customers to help them solve their problems? And so super excited to be here today and to talk about AI for agriculture.
Great, thanks. And Tim Bucher? I've been so worried about getting your name wrong. And
that's okay, Michael.
Co-founder of Agtonomy. Pronounce it for me, make sure we get it right.
All right, yeah. Hi, everyone, I'm Tim Bucher.
Bucher.
But I really don't care how you pronounce the name. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of Agtonomy, which is a much smaller startup than my colleagues to my right. We're almost 4 years old, and we are a software automation company that believes in working with OEMs who are incredible at manufacturing fantastic equipment for agriculture, but might not have the speed to market and might need some help accelerating their digital transformation. So we partner with OEMs, and we help accelerate their smart equipment to market. It's great to be here.
I spent a little time walking around the show yesterday and the press event the day before, and there's like a personal flying machine. There's all sorts of crazy gadgets, and so that's expected at CES, right? A lot of people don't necessarily expect farming conversations in ag at CES. So, and in particular, talk about AI in ag. I think it's an interesting thing. People may say or wonder how we use AI in ag. Tim, since you've been in a lot of different industries, we talk about how you're involved with consumer electronics, gaming, Apple, and now that you're talking about ag as your industry. How is this industry adopt or embrace technologies compared to these other industries you've been in? Do they embrace it? Is it slower? Talk about what your experience has been.
So the one thing I didn't mention in the intro is that I'm also a farmer, and I have been my entire life. So I started my own farming operation when I was a teenager, and it's grown into a reasonable-sized olive oil. I grow olives, and wine business in California. I grow grapes. And I've always kept sort of the church and state separate. But what happened over the last decade is the challenges, and I think my colleagues and I want to touch on that, have just become greater and greater and greater. And the only way we can find a way through that is by embracing technology. And I would say 10 years ago, farmers did not embrace technology as much as they do now. What's happened over the last just few years is the desperation has gotten so high. More and more farms are going out of business, and if you bring technology solutions like John Deere and others are bringing to market, and also on the ag inputs and stuff, you're finding a much greater acceptance to making that happen. It's actually a really interesting time in agriculture right now, where the technology is really going to be embraced even more going forward.
Sarah, can you talk about some of those challenges? I mean, 10 years, things have really accelerated in terms of making things harder for farmers. What are some of the challenges they're facing on the farm that maybe technology can address?
For sure. So farmers face a lot of challenges. So if you think about farmers, first you've got to recognize they're running a business. So they are there, they are growing food, they are growing fuel, they are growing the fiber for the clothes we're wearing. And that's part of a business that they're running. And so they are trying to make the best business decisions that they can make to have a successful year. And so they face challenges. Labor challenges are always a big problem. Do they have enough people to do the job that needs to be done when they need to do it? They face a lot of really critical time pressures. Tim, I'm sure you know this from your farm. When you need to plant when the soil is warm enough, you need to plant when the weather is cooperating. You can't be out there when it's raining because the soil is too muddy. And same thing when it's time to harvest. When that crop is ready to come out of the field, it needs to come out of the field, and you've got to manage through the weather that's happening. And then you've also need to have enough people there on the farm to do the job and to get that done. And then they've also just got a lot of challenges. They're trying to run a farm and a business, and so they're trying to manage all of the costs associated with that as well. And so it's an enormous amount of decisions that they're making. Another thing to maybe think about, especially here, in the U.S. and the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of farmers only have one crop a year, and so they only get one chance. So if you think, I'm a software engineer by trade, so we'll do sprint planning, and we'll execute a 2-week sprint, and then we'll kind of retro on that and say, let's try this next time, and we'll do this a little differently, see if we can be more efficient. Farmers don't get 2-week sprints. They get one crop a year, and so they really have to be thoughtful and intentional about what are they trying that year, what are they doing, because that is their business, that's their profit that year.
Jacqueline, talk a little bit about how AI maybe can help before anything gets to the farm, because we're going to talk a little bit about obviously how AI can help farmers maybe do their job better, but also in many ways I see AI helping farmers in kind of a full spectrum with products before they even arrive there, and that's in many ways what your company does, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think, we think a lot about U.S. growers or growers in the first world, and in a lot of developing worlds, farming is completely different than it is, here. And so you really need technologies that scale. And so one of the most fundamental things for any grower is to develop resilient seeds. So with pressures of needing to produce more food for the growing global population, for the pressures of climate change, and you need more resilient seeds, so you need productivity, you need resiliency, and then you also have the fact that ag is a huge contributor to climate change, so you also need to think about emissions. So farmers are facing so many different challenges, and so what we do is think through, how can you develop inputs much more quickly that can adapt very quickly to the changing environment that's out there for growers. Pest pressures are going to be changing with climate change. And then, and I think with AI, applications to plant breeding are tremendous in creating more resilient varieties, climate-smart varieties where farmers can plant around the world in order to improve their productivity and profitability, or just livelihoods, improving their livelihoods.
Yeah, I follow the future food space, and there's been a whole cohort of startups pop up that are using AI to accelerate looking for new interesting combinations of, for example, proteins that can create the next great plant-based protein. And it sounds like AI is doing the similar thing in terms of accelerating what would probably be hundreds of years in a lab, and kind of getting through a lot of that faster with AI, so we can just get to these discoveries more quickly.
That's really what it is. And if you think about any industrial revolution, that's what it was: a tractor and autonomy causing this incredible acceleration and making what farmers do easier. The same is AI. So data is the new tractor. I think AI is going to accelerate just about everything we do, from creating better inputs to optimizing this big optimization issue that farmers have on farm, and creating the most profitability for them.
Can we maybe step back and look at how AI is being maybe used today versus the way it was 5 years ago, and then maybe look 5 years forward? What kind of technologies or AIs will be used then? So Sarah, can you give us a little kind of picture for us?
Yeah, sure. I'll start, and I would love to hear what everyone else chimes in, because I think there's just a lot of opportunity around what AI will bring to the whole industry, and I think also other technologies as well. I think that's some of the exciting opportunities ahead of us. So, if you look back over the last 5 years or so, in 2022, John Deere introduced our first autonomous tractor here at CES. And so that's a great example of using computer vision and machine learning to help really automate, and in this case, make a machine fully autonomous. And I think that's a great example of using data, using sensor technology to help be more productive on a farm, to help with that labor challenge. And so over the last 5 years, we've continued, at least within John Deere and as an industry as a whole, to evolve that. And so, we introduced here at this show our second generation autonomy solution, and just, it's more cameras, it's more compute, and it's just taking that next step forward in all the different autonomous jobs that can happen on the farm. And then if you think about, the data side of things, and so even within a machine, all of those sensors, the GPS localization, the connectivity, there's just a lot of opportunity with data. And so how can we use that data to help farmers be more efficient, more productive? How do we help serve their operation? We have a John Deere Operations Center, which is a web and mobile application where farmers can use that data to then manage their farm. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there as we look to the future. Kind of curious what you think about it.
Yeah, well, I think you're dead on, and what you're talking about is really physical AI in terms of, utilizing sensors for navigation of robotics and whatnot. The tractors are robots now, and that's really, really critical in one area. Obviously, Jacqueline in another area, and once you have the crops established, a lot of people don't realize that not all crops are the same. A lot of people think, oh, you just grow stuff and you just try to grow as much as possible. And I'm here to dispel that fact. You have row crops, big ag as it's called, and then you have high value crops or specialty crops, which is where we get a lot of our proteins from, your fruit and your nut trees, your grapes and things of that nature. And that's a multi-trillion-dollar segment of our food chain. And so crop analytics have taken a whole new form over just the past few years. First of all, you have to collect a lot of data, and it used to be that the data analytics were more expensive than collecting the data. Now it's more expensive to collect the data, which is why we need physical AI to drive robots to collect data. and then do analytics on that. So what kind of analytics? There's the obvious of diseases and whatnot for these kind of trees and vines that are worth literally thousands of dollars each. But there's also doing what's called crop load management. So with AI now, when you have these sensors going through these fields, and we'll just use, I don't know, oranges or apples as an example, you're actually looking at the size of the plant. You know from research the optimal crop load that size of plant should carry. And you're basically counting, the blossoms as early on in the growing season as you can to then selectively reduce the fruit positions so that the remaining fruit is of higher quality. Super important in apples, for example. Because apples for juice, they don't need to look pretty, but apples to eat need to look pretty. And so that's why you want to do an optimal crop load. And then the grower gets paid more. And when I say get paid more, I mean this is to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and it's make or break, right, in terms of the growing season. So crop analytics is a really exciting space, not just before the seed is created and modified and all the ag inputs are there, but then caring for that afterwards and optimizing the crop load for those particular crops.
It sounds like physical automation goes hand in hand, is a necessary foundation for a lot of this kind of value-added AI analysis that comes later, and really crucial. So much of the conversation over the past couple of years has been around large language models, and everyone's been toying with ChatGPT, et cetera. Can you kind of maybe connect for people, any one of you, like how AI is being used on the farm, and then maybe will we ultimately see, is large language models being used on farms? Is these types of new models being used to power any of these applications?
I don't think they're being used, largely today. I think it's much more of the physical AI about getting data. I mean, farmers or anyone will use it in the same way that all of us, might use large language models in our everyday lives. And maybe other people would argue, but I think in the future, that's where, if you think about agentic AI or physical AI, when you actually create a digital twin and you need these large language models and generative AI to sort of orchestrate, what this sequence of analysis that's happening with the data and the models that are used for particular questions. So I think as you get closer to being able to simulate a farm in all of its complexity, that's where that's where it will come in.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jacqueline. And actually, just this week at CES, the CEO of NVIDIA described sort of the next generation beyond generative AI, which is physical AI. And instead of large language models, it's about large world models. And they've even announced some tools for that, right, where you have these world foundational models now that can be used to create synthetic scenarios that can then be used for physical AI, right? Because you can't drive a John Deere tractor in every condition in whatever state you want to pick or whatever country you want to pick. But with these kind of now, world foundational models, you can. Because you drive it in one area and then you say, okay, make it, every weather condition you can imagine and throw every kind of obstacle and every kind of animal at it. And then you can create solutions that, bring you that physical AI much sooner.
Sarah, is your mind kind of exploding in terms of the possibilities, what you can do with these next generation technologies built into a John Deere tractor for maybe applications that a farmer can maybe map his own farm and maybe kind of run scenarios, have a digital twin of his farm? Where can we go with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many possibilities. And even when you were talking about, physical AI and the sensors moving through the field, we introduced our See and Spray solution a few years ago, and that's where we use cameras to see weeds, and then we can spray only the weeds. And so that's a cost savings for the farmer. There's obviously, a sustainability benefit as well. And I think that's a really great example of where technology can really be a win-win for farmers. To your question, I think there's lots of possibility. I mean, even as you were talking, my head was immediately just almost brainstorming. And I think the key is, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we are being really responsible with this technology, and that we are using it to serve the customer and the customer's problems. And so I go back, one of the things I say is, at John Deere, we don't do technology just because technology is cool and technology is fun. We do it because it serves the customer, it solves a customer problem. And so as these tools, as these technologies mature, and we really fully understand their power and their capabilities, we'll be making sure that anything that is getting adopted, and the market will do this as well, is just making sure that it does provide value, that it is solving something, making something easier for the farmer and benefiting their operation.
Has Deere looked at agents? I mean, I know that that's a lot of the conversation in the AI world today, like OpenAI. There's speculation that their agents are going to be coming out soon. Can we see, maybe I have a dedicated agent as a farmer that will just look at soil health, or maybe I can't ultimately see an AI agent running an entire farm, but could you see agents being used in strategic places in the future?
Yeah, I can't get into lots of details about anything that we're working on, but I think understanding the technology, there's lots of potential there. One of the things that my team specifically does at John Deere is look at new technology and explore where does it make sense for customers. And so like any new technology, we take a look, we understand the customer needs, and then we really ground that in just good product development practices and figure out what technology is going to meet that need the best that we can.
And Michael, I actually think an agent can run a farm, and we are headed there. And I'll give you an example. Today, the way big farms and small farms work is they start with a work order, which is, plant soybean on my 100,000 acres. I wish I had 100,000 acres. And so that's the work order, right? But that gets broken down into jobs like plant, block 52, which might only be 4,000 acres, using this strain of soybean seeds or what have you. And then that gets broken down into tasks, which is take tractor number 3 and load it with these seeds and drive it to there and do these 10 rows, and then another tractor does the other 10 rows. So it's all broken down that way. But if you think about the input side of that, today what happens is the farmer makes the decision, to Sarah's point earlier about the weather conditions and everything, as to when those tractors go out or when those seeds are planted or what have you, right? That can all now be an agent that guides the farmer. The farmer still needs to be in control, but now the farmer has a console, and it basically says, okay, with these weather patterns and with these conditions, Tuesday at 3 o'clock, get the engines revved, or spray this particular ag input, and we call that closing the loop, and that's something that we've never been able to do in farming, and we're at the cusp of achieving that. And I predict within the next 5 years, many farms will be operated fully with agents that basically help guide them. They can still stop things or, accelerate things if they need, but I think it's going to help farmers a lot, and they definitely need that help.
What do you think, will there be resistance to that? I mean, I imagine some farmers might be, hey, I don't want to turn over my farm to technology. Some may be embracing it because they realize they need to survive. But you think there'll be some resistance to that type of technology, or ultimately they'll just? Tim's shaking his head.
Actually, Sarah, I think you should talk about your the press conference. Some of the stats that were given there. I mean, farmers are getting older. The average age is 58. And guess what? Those farmers are working 12 to 18 hours a day, and I can attest to that, okay? And guess what? The next generation is not going into it. So they're desperate for these kinds of solutions, and I think there is no farmer who would love to have such a command center, if you will, that they can operate their farming operation from. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to what we've been talking about, right? If the tool provides value for their business, I think that they'll adopt it. If the tool doesn't provide value for the business, they're not going to adopt it just because it's a cool technology, right? But if as an industry, as John Deere, if we can build tools with this technology that really serves the customer and helps them make better decisions, help them, whether it's be more precise or be more productive, or whether it's to solve a labor challenge. Like I said, there's no shortage of challenges that our farmers are facing as they feed us. And so as long as the tools we're bringing really help them do something either more efficiently, more productively, I don't think that there'll be any adoption challenge.
I always like to ask folks who are from a space like farming and to make the pitch to people who are more general technologists. If you're sitting in the audience and you're developing an AI, you're a computer science major, why should they consider ag as a kind of an end-use industry, application industry that they should focus on? I kind of would say that there's big problems to solve. That's just one big idea, one reason. But I'd love to hear from you guys why you think ag is a good place for computer scientists to focus their.
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, there are a lot of problems to solve, and a lot of people want to have an impact on society, and food production is really is facing a lot of challenges, and so I think that's it. One of the things bringing the conversation back to talking about farmers globally is a very different story, right? And one of the things that I think about data or AI software is that maybe it will help more technology be accessible to farmers around the globe versus a lot of the technology being accessible to a small subset of the farmers. I mean, 75% in the developing communities, 75% of the people make their livelihoods from farming, and they don't have the same access to technology. So I think it's a democratization that data and AI will also help to get best practices, information, data, because it scales and it can be transferred across long distances. And so that to me is a really exciting aspect of AI.
Yeah, I agree, Jacqueline. And there's one other thing I want to add to that. The name of this panel, or one of the titles, is AI or Die. And so that's not, by the way, that's not like, a hyperbole. Like, we are facing an existential threat here as our population is growing by 25% by 2050, and we can't even feed the world. So why should companies be interested in agriculture? It's because of survival of the global society, if you really want to get down to it. But if you look at the whole ecosystem, it's not just about the food part of the ecosystem, which affects the end customer. You also look at companies. With all due respect to my colleague here, I think she knows that if you don't have skilled labor, which is becoming more and more rare, no one will drive your vehicles. So to see the technology embracement that companies like John Deere and many others have brought in agriculture, it's sort of it's a necessity. It's not a convenience and it's not a cool thing. It's a necessity for the farmers, it's a necessity for the consumers, and it's a necessity for the equipment manufacturers, the ag input manufacturers, the whole food chain.
Yeah, and I'll add on too. I mean, I do a lot of recruiting, and so I think our message really resonates with students as they're coming out of college, because it is an impactful industry to work in. You can help feed the world, and it sounds a little bit like hyperbole, but I think it's true. We're helping farmers feed the world, and it's also how do we help farmers be more sustainable? How do we help them be more productive? How do we help them be more efficient? And I think also, you called tractors robots earlier, and in some ways they are these days. Especially the autonomous robot or the autonomous tractors, but even the highly automated equipment is really moving towards robotics. And so, as much as I've sat up here and said, these products have to solve problems for customers and solve real world problems, they do. At the same time, it is very cool technology, and you are getting to apply this technology, in our case, on really large equipment. And so I'll say, as a software engineer, there's just not a lot of things cooler than you've written a line of software and this giant machine moves in response to the software that you wrote. So I think for me, at least personally, and I think probably for all of us up here, it is a very interesting and rewarding problem to solve. It is real high-tech, new tech, emerging technology that we work in every day. And it does feel like the problems we're solving matter.
You know what else is an indication that ag is really important in the technology world? Just look at the top three. There's only really three. Cloud providers, okay? They have special groups that are dedicated to the financial institution, because there's lots of data there. Well, guess what they did 5 years ago? They now all have ag groups. And that goes to tell you that, and they seek data, right? They follow the data, and that data is in ag. And then Sarah, from a recruiting standpoint, I don't know if AI or die would be a good recruiting line. But feeding the world is much better
Yeah.
because it is actually true.
You're right that I think the big tech platform players looked at ag as an interesting vertical, but it is challenging for them to try and go it alone and spin up a company. We know, we talked a little bit on our pre-call about how Google spun out a company out of X, focused on basically kind of gathering data with satellites and analyzing it and using AI, and they kind of shuttered that down and I think turned over the assets to Driscoll's or some other folks. So what they kind of need to work with guys like John Deere, and they need to work with farmers, but they don't necessarily. Why is it so hard for them to start up their own companies? I guess, why did Google shut that down? I guess I'm wondering. Feel free to.
Well, I'd like to hear Jacqueline and Sarah, but I don't think you have to have farmer DNA in the company to be successful. When startup companies come to me and say, oh, I want to start something in agriculture, the first thing I say to them is hire a farmer. And those ag tech companies who do not have that kind of DNA never are successful, okay? So it's called, this is something I always say, and forgive me for saying it again, for those of you who've ever heard me talk, it's called ag tech, not tech ag, right? You have to lead with ag. And also, I think Google spent too much money on that. But anyway, you got to be a little scrappier. I know, Jacqueline, what do you think? Why do you think that failed, mineral?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've been in venture, and you see some of the early decision support software that was launched had a challenging time at the beginning because they went out there and they thought, well, of course, every farmer would want to iterate with them to perfect it. They knew it was just a beta version, but then it didn't go well, and so it really caused a negative, a negative feeling among farmers that people are just trying to give them things that don't really work. And so I think it's been an uphill battle to get back to a better place from that initial start. And so ag is a very different industry, and farmers, it's exceedingly complex. It's razor thin margins. And so I think those are some of the challenges that people who start companies in the ag tech space have to go into it with their eyes wide open.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, just like in farming, not all farming is created the same, nor is all ag tech created the same. So those of us on the stage, for example, don't necessarily believe in vertical farming. Those are companies that build huge buildings, huge infrastructure, and then grow crops inside. Well, that just can't scale, right? Companies like John Deere still believe in Mother Nature. And that's the only way we can attack it. So we have to bring the technology to the crops, not the crops to the technology. And unfortunately, in ag tech, vertical growing gets lumped in with robotics, gets lumped in with data analytics, gets lumped in with everything.
We talked a little bit also on the pre-call about the need for patience in developing these technology solutions, because it sometimes takes a while to get them adopted, to make sure they work right. And you mentioned a little bit about the early kind of startups maybe didn't do so well. Is this a tough space for startups to jump into, even if they hire a farmer? Because sometimes it does take a while to develop the right solutions, to get farmers to believe in you. Is it harder than other spaces?
I think it is. I think it's hard. I think it's getting a lot better. I think I would just look at it as sort of an immature ecosystem. So there were people that went into this space quite early, and I think we need a series of entrepreneurs that have been there, succeeded, failed, or whatever, and then we also need growth capital. So surprisingly, agriculture is underinvested in, and there's a lot of people willing to put a small amount of money in early stage ventures, but when it comes to actually the patient capital to scale the technology, that's where you have to turn to a generalist investor, and then generalist investors, they don't understand the space as well, so it takes a lot of time to develop a relationship with them. So I think it's a maturing ecosystem for ag tech and early stage venture.
And we're not going to get political, but I do think the next 4 years, next 8 years could be really interesting we know that a lot of the labor on farms oftentimes are immigrants. And so can we talk about how technology and AI can maybe help farmers if they're having challenges in the next few years with their workforce?
Yeah, I'd like to give an example of something that I think is really cool too. But first, as a little background, as Sarah stated, labor is a massive issue in agriculture, right? I'm a 6th generation farmer and I have 3 children and none of them are taking over my farm. My brother, the same thing, right? The buck stops with us. You're seeing that in large farms and small farms alike. So immigrants are core to agriculture in this country and many other countries. And certainly the challenges and you know the immigration regulations have a big impact on agriculture. In high tech, it's H-1B visas. In agriculture, it's H-2A visas, which are for seasonal workers. And any perturbation in those kind of visas can have a massive global impact in inflation and just the cost of groceries. So that's a really big deal. So what we've seen is our customers, who are some of the largest growers of permanent crops in the world, they've taken the labor that they have and they've upskilled them to be what they call ag tech operators, where they can now operate equipment from their air-conditioned pickup trucks or even the barn. And they love that. They love to be trained on this next generation. The funny example, or not the funny example, a really important example is one of our customers had so many openings for tractor drivers that they couldn't fill. They started to work with Agtonomy. They saw the benefits and they said, hey, maybe I don't have to put an ad in the paper or online for a tractor driver. Maybe I make it an ag tech operator. And as the requirement in terms of experience, I'm going to put video game experience. That's awesome. And the resume flow exploded. And they hired ag tech operators who never had their butt in a tractor seat, operating tractors and getting incredible work done. So I think it's, the shortage is going to continue, but we can solve it.
Does the workforce of the future look kind of like, we've had to develop like drone operators, et cetera. Sarah, when you think about developing the workforce of the future for farmers, is it a lot of these people who maybe have video game experience and kind of operate these machines in VR environments or whatever?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned John Deere Operations Center earlier, which is our web and mobile platform. So our autonomous machines, you can run those from your cell phone, and you can manage a farm from your phone or from your tablet or from your PC. And I think, understanding technology, understanding data, and using data to make informed decisions about your business, that's really where this is headed. There's probably always going to be some need to whether it's just transporting equipment or moving equipment. Farmers still really like to drive equipment. They're still, they feel that connection to the land. And so, we're definitely going to be in a transition period for a while. But there are, you mentioned a lot of good stats earlier, there's a lot of real labor concerns and the aging workforce, just the increased demand for food. And so we've got to look at all the different technology solutions to help farmers out through all of this. And I think, but yeah, for sure, absolutely. Understanding technology, being able to use it, that's important. You were talking a little bit earlier about just adoption too, but building technology in a way that's easy to use and easy to understand and in a way that the users trust it, I think that's really important too for adoption. So, again, back to farmers don't have that many chances every year to grow a crop, maybe one or two. Just the investments, the complexity of their business, they have to be confident that technology will work. And so they do need to know that as technologists, we're bringing them technology that we've tested, that we've worked, that we know will work for their crops and for their operation.
Great, we're basically at a minute. So I always like to do like a last minute, just speed round. What are you most excited about over the next 5 years with regards to technology and farming? Just real quick, start with each one of you. I'll start with you, Jacqueline.
Oh gosh, the pressure.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm excited about, again, this ability to collect more data and have data work for growers. I think that really AI is nothing without high quality data. So there's a tremendous opportunity for people to get into the ag tech space and help, create systems for collecting better data, analyzing data, and helping growers. And then the democratization. I really do feel as though we need to think of ag tech as a global, try to have a global impact, and that's where I think there's tremendous opportunity. It gets me excited.
Great. Sarah?
So I'm just really excited about how we're able to help farmers. I've got a lot of passion. I grew up on a family farm as well. A lot of passion for helping farmers be successful, and I don't see any end to the roadmap for how technology can come to farms, how farmers can use it to just make their lives easier, to make their farms more productive. I think, back to as an engineer, there's just a lot of really interesting problems that we're going to get to continue to solve and help farmers adopt technology.
Thank you. Tim?
I'm really excited. I think we're at this perfect storm moment in history, if you will. And I'm with Jacqueline on the data part. We've just scratched the surface on data. We're going to have more and more ability to collect more and more data to ultimately make agriculture and farming more efficient. And that's ultimately what we need in the world. And that's, definitely what agriculture needs. So I'm so excited about what the future holds there.
Great. Well, I really enjoyed this panel. I learned a lot. And I would ask you guys to give them a big round of applause. Thank you, guys.